Greetings, world. It's your boy Jason Armstrong coming to you with another segment of A Slice of Pie. This is where we talk all things community and hopefully building community through partnerships, innovation, and empowerment. On this week's segment, I'm going story time, and I'm sharing one of the stories that I highlight in the book. So if you don't have your copy of I'm Done Here Yet, hopefully this story will motivate you to go get your copy and read the book, because if nothing else, some of the things that I share in there are not only insightful, but they're entertaining. And the motivation behind me choosing to go with the story time segment this week, I have to give a shout out to my buddy Nick, who I was able to see recently on one of my business trips. And Nick had just finished reading the book. And he was telling me that when he got to this particular story, he had heard me tell this story before. And so he was comparing the version of the story that I tell when I talk about it compared to how I had to write about it in the book, and he preferred the storytelling version of this story compared to how it was written in the book. And so, getting that feedback, I thought it would be a good idea for me to come on in one of my segments and share this story from the book, because maybe the audio version of me telling it will land a little bit better than how it is in the book and how you have to write when you write a book. So, in the first chapter of the book, I talk about the early part of my career, or me coming into the profession of law enforcement. And I share two stories that really contribute to how I ultimately saw things, or how I ultimately view things, and really were a catalyst for me and what my career would go on to be. And in those two examples, I classify one as a highlight, something very positive for me that I felt great about. And then the other one was a low light, a moment that I wish didn't happen. But looking back on it, I'm appreciative that it happened, because it was a great lesson for me, not only professionally, but personally also. And I share both stories just to show the full picture of what goes into someone's journey and the uniqueness of it, because it's not all going to be highlights. And I think a lot of us have a lot of low light moments that shape and form the ultimate person that we become. And so this week I'm going to talk about the highlight, because that's the story that Nick brought up and was talking about. And maybe next week or in a future segment, I'll share the story of my low light moment. But with my highlight moment early in my career that really shaped what I would go on to become, and ultimately what my career was, is is a story that whenever I get asked the question, what was my best moment or the thing that I was most proud of in my career, although I accomplished so much, I always go back to this story, and I use this example to answer that question, because for me, it was the foundation that I built the rest of my career on, and I give it a lot of credit for what it did for me. So this was very early in my career, the first few years of my career. So I'm not a supervisor, don't have any supervisory authority, anything like that. And I'm working one evening. So I'm in uniform, I'm out on patrol, and I make a traffic stop. So I stop a car for speeding. Don't remember what time it was, but it was dark outside. But I don't think it was too terribly late. And I remember it was a Friday evening. So maybe 10, 11 o'clock at night on a Friday evening. And I stop a car for speeding. I get up to the car to go through my spiel. The car was being driven by a young black male that was maybe between 19 and 21 years old, somewhere in that space. So legally an adult, but still definitely a young man. And actually, I wasn't that much older than the individual at the time. I probably was 23, 24 maybe. So I get his information. I tell him why I stop him. I go back to my patrol car and I run his information in the system. And he pops up that he has an arrest warrant. So I get another unit there for backup. And I go up to his car. I get him out of the car. And I put him in handcuffs, and I explain to him that there's a warrant out for his arrest. Now, immediately, and I have to say that the overwhelming majority of the time, every time that this happened, every time that I arrested somebody who had a warrant, The overwhelming majority of the time, the person was in complete disbelief that they had a warrant out for their arrest, and they were unaware of it, and they didn't believe. And it was always, not always, but the majority of the time, what you kind of get is like, no, there must be some kind of mix up because I don't have a warrant or I haven't done anything to deserve a warrant, and so there's something wrong. So when I told this young man that he had a warrant out for his arrest, that was the response that I got from him. He was like, nah, there has to be some kind of mistake because I haven't done anything. I haven't been involved in anything to where I would have a warrant out for my arrest. And the way that the process works is the computer shows us that there's a warrant. We go and we put the person in handcuffs. So we have them detained. So we have them secured. And then at that point, we tell the dispatchers to confirm the warrant. So when you first put them in handcuffs, the person is just being detained. So you have them secure, and then they have to send off for the confirmation for the warrant. They communicate to the agency that took out the warrant, and they have to go through their files and confirm that, yes, this is still a valid warrant, and we want you all to hold this individual so we can serve this warrant on them. So I get them detained. I send the information in. I have them detained, confirm the warrant. And so in the meantime, he's talking to me, telling me that there must be some kind of mistake and this isn't right. So I explained to him, well, if it's not a valid warrant, then they won't confirm it and they will tell me that. And if the warrant is not confirmed, then I take you out of handcuffs and I send you on your way. You're going to get your speeding ticket and you'll be able to go on with the rest of your evening. When the hit comes back, the warrant comes back confirmed. So they tell me that the warrant is confirmed, it's a valid warrant, and so this young man is supposed to go to jail. So I tell him, hey man, I don't know all what's going on, but the warrant has been confirmed, so I am taking you to jail. And he's still just in disbelief, and he is adamant that this warrant can't be valid. So he's asking me a bunch of questions. What is the warrant for? What is this about? What is it related to? You got to tell me something. And one thing that I always try to impress upon young people when they find themselves in bad situations or challenging situations, whether it's with law enforcement or any authority figure, is the importance of keeping your composure as best as you can, but being mindful of how you talk to people and trying to have some respect, whatever you're conveying or how you're advocating for yourself. In this situation, I give that all the credit to this young man because despite how challenging it was for him to be put in handcuffs and to get arrested, he was very respectful in how he talked to me. And that went a long way with me that night because I can be honest and tell you, if he was back there cursing me out and calling me out my name and all that other stuff, I would not have been motivated to go the extra mile to try to help him or to try to verify what it was that he was telling me, because the system that we have in place had confirmed the information, and our system is the holy grail. Whatever the system tells us and confirms, that's what we go off of. And so the young man is asking me these questions, and because it wasn't my agency's warrant, there's only limited information that I can see on the screen. And so I'm looking at the information that they have loaded into the system, and I'm trying to answer his questions the best that I can with the information that I have available to me. And largely, the only thing that I could tell him is what the warrant was for. And I don't even remember what the warrant was for at this point. But I tell him what the warrant is for, and I tell him who took the warrant out, what agency the warrant came from. And that's really all I have in front of me. And when I tell him that, the young man tells me that he has already been arrested for this. And he's like, sir, I promise you that the computer is wrong. I've already, from what you're telling me, I haven't gotten in trouble for anything related to that since all of this originally happened. And the warrant information that you're giving me, I've already been arrested for this before. Sir, if you would just please do me a favor and call my mother. She should be at home and she can go get the paperwork from when I got out of jail the last time to explain to you that I've already been arrested for this. So I have my paperwork and stuff that I have to work on. But because of how respectful this young man was and how he was advocating for himself, I called his mother for him. Like I said, if he'd been cursing me out and been rude and all that other stuff, I wouldn't have taken the time to do this. But that night, because of how he was handling the situation, it led me to ultimately make some really good decisions that night. So I call his mother. I explained to her who I am, and I explained the situation at hand. I stopped her son. He has a warrant out for his arrest. He's adamant that this warrant cannot be valid, that he's already been arrested on it before. He told me that you may have the paperwork there to try to help his case. And one thing of note, and I talk about this part with young people also, is like I said, this young man was around between 19 and 21. So legally, he was an adult. So I was not obligated to call his mother and talk to his mother about anything. Once you turn 18, you are an adult. And regardless if you still live at home or you still rely on your parents, none of that stuff matters. He was an adult, but because of how he handled the situation, I went the extra mile for him. So his mother goes and gets the paperwork, and she's reading to me the stuff on the paperwork. And what got my attention was she read a number. And I don't even remember what she called the number, but it was some reference number on the document, on the paperwork that she was looking at. And that reference number was the same number that was on the warrant. And when she read that number to me, that's when I really started to get that feeling. I think I believe this young man, and I'm starting to side with him because how the number system worked with warrants and different things like that, you wouldn't find that same number to be the warrant number if it wasn't the same situation. They pick a different number for each entry. So I talked to her a little bit more. I get some more information off of her paperwork, and now I'm feeling pretty confident that this young man is telling me the truth. And the dates that they give me of when he was arrested are after the date that the warrant had been entered into the system. And so I can see all of that on my screen. And so I'm believing this young man. Now, the problem that I have is the warrant has already been confirmed. And so we have communicated to this other entity that we had this individual. He is in our custody, and we are taking him to the jail for you all, and he'll be held there until you all come and serve him with the warrant and pick him up and get him into your process. And so this was the first time in my career that I had been faced with something like this. And so I didn't know what could be done, or how you can backtrack and reverse that once everything has been confirmed. Like I said, this is in the first few years of my career. So I call the watch commander. For those not familiar with law enforcement, the watch commander is the person that is in charge of the police department outside of the regular hours of the department. And so this was a Friday evening, and there are no chiefs, assistant chiefs, majors. Everybody's gone home. And so the watch commander is who was in charge of all of the officers on the street. For us, it was a captain. And so I called the captain and I explained the situation at hand. And I explained that I believe the young man has already been arrested for this, given the information that the mother gave me from the paperwork. And so I'm asking for guidance on how to handle the situation. And the captain tells me, well, no, he asked me, I should say, did you confirm the warrant, or was the warrant confirmed? Yes, sir. He said, so it was confirmed as a valid warrant. Yes, sir. It's confirmed as a valid warrant. Said, all right, take him to jail. He said, that's the only thing that we go off of is what the system says. And if it was confirmed, then our job is to take him to jail, and it's somebody else's job to figure out the rest, or his situation. That's for him to worry about. That's not our concern. We have a valid warrant. It's been confirmed. So our duty and our obligation is to take this individual to jail. So I get the order from the captain. So get him down to the jail. Dang, that wasn't the response that I was hoping for, but I don't have any authority in this space. And now I've been given a direct order from a superior. So now I have to take this young man to jail. And one of the things that I always talk about when I share this story is the jail was several miles away. And although the captain gave me the order to take him to jail, the captain never told me how fast I had to drive to get there. And without a doubt, this night, as I'm taking that young man to jail, was the absolute slowest I have ever driven a police car. And I'm driving at a snail's pace because I'm trying to buy myself time to think and just think what I could do to try to help this young man to confirm if he was supposed to be going to jail or not. Because the last thing that I wanted to do was to put somebody in jail that did not deserve to be there, that wasn't supposed to be there. Although I would have been covered, and I was well within the legalities of things because I had a confirmed warrant. Morally, that didn't sit well with me. And the more time went on and the more I talked to this young man and I'm on calls with his mom and stuff, the more and more convinced I am that this young man has already been to jail for this, and he is, doesn't deserve to be going to jail this evening. But it's a Friday night, so all of the offices are closed and people are out doing what you do on a Friday night in Atlanta. So we're calling the office that the warrant is from. Of course, nobody is there. We have to leave messages, and we're calling after hour numbers and different things, just trying to get somebody to call us back to see what they can tell us or what they can share with us about the status of this warrant, because I don't think it's valid. So making all of these phone calls as I'm driving very slowly to the jail, and just every inch closer I get to the jail, I'm losing hope that I'm going to be able to help this young man. And ultimately, I'm going to have to book him into the jail where I don't believe he's supposed to be. And just as I turn into the jail parking lot, one of the dispatchers calls me over the radio and they tell me to call in as quick as I can. And I call back to the dispatch center and they tell me that they finally got called back from the office where the warrant was out of. And they were able to confirm to us over the phone that the warrant was not valid, that the young man had been arrested on this warrant already. And clearly there was a mix up at the jail and the warrant never got properly cleared out of the computer system. And so it was still showing valid even once the confirmation was sent. But we got an official person to confirm for us that the warrant was not valid, and they were going to send over the appropriate paperwork that I needed to be able to show that this warrant had already been served, because I had been told by the captain that I had to take this man to jail, and now I was about to release him. So I needed all the documentation to support that. And so I pulled over right there in the parking lot of the jail, and I call his mother, and I tell his mother we finally got it all sorted out and we were able to confirm that this warrant isn't valid. And I told his mother, I will sit here in the parking lot and wait for you to come get him so I can turn him over to you. And just while we're sitting there, me and the young man have time to just have a conversation. Like I said, I'm not much older than he was at the time. And clearly he had made some bad decisions in his short time in life up until that point that had landed him in this position. And so we were just talking a little bit about that, and he was talking about wanting to do things differently and wanting to really get his life on track and to stop having these kind of experiences with law enforcement and going to jail and different things like that. And I would never forget when his mother got there. I had him out of the car. I had already taken him out of handcuffs. So we just standing there just chopping it up. And his mother gets there and she runs over to me and she gives me probably the biggest hug, tightest hug that I probably had in my life, because she was that appreciative that I took the time and I made the investment to help her son that night. And I was proud of what I had done because that went against the grain for what I felt the culture of my agency was at the time. And when I say that, we were very numbers driven, and we relied heavily on how many arrests you made, how many tickets you wrote. Just activity was how you shine at my agency at that point in time in my career. And I went above and beyond to prevent myself from getting numbers, from getting stats in that. And that was why that moment for me stood out so much, and why I was so proud of myself for what I did that night, because it went against the grain for things that on the surface would have looked like would have helped me, or it would have shown that I was doing a good job, because I spent hours vested in this. And so that's hours that I'm not out on the street being active and productive and doing things. But I largely feel the impact that I had on that young man that night, with him to see from law enforcement, where he had been arrested and had some experiences that weren't all of that positive, but to have a member of law enforcement show him that level of compassion and empathy and to go the extra mile to try to help him. I know it in my heart that he had a great appreciation for that, not just not going to jail that evening. And what that largely fueled in me, that would carry me throughout my career, is when I would talk about impact, with officers and the people that I led, and how we're not here to get numbers, or numbers don't tell the whole story. I'm not interested in what your numbers come in at every month. What I'm interested in is, do you feel as though that you are making an impact and that you're having a positive impact on people and on the community at large? And now, one thing that I was dreading that night was my drive back to the police department, because now I had to go back to the station and I had to explain to the captain that all the work that I did to confirm that this young man wasn't supposed to go to jail, and that I had cut him loose, and he didn't go to jail. And I remember I came and I explained everything to the captain, and the captain was just like, "That's fine. Now get back out there on the streets and get back to work." And that experience for me, it still is up there at the top. And I appreciate the feeling that I get when I even share this story, because it left a lasting mark on me, and really contributed to the officer that I ultimately became, and the leader in the profession that I ultimately became, because I saw the value in being intentional to have a positive impact on people, regardless of who the individual is and the circumstances surrounding why you are engaging or interacting with them. And it didn't matter what this young man's past was or what he had done in his past. I was positioned to help him when he needed help, and I was able to help him in that moment. So that was my highlight story that I share in the first chapter of my book. And so I'd be curious to hear from any of the other readers in my book if you feel the same way that Nick feels, that me sharing that story and telling it is a way better version than what you read in the book. And maybe that'll fuel me to do more of these storytelling segments of A Slice of Pie. So that is the story. And because I shared my highlight, I will promise to share my low light in the near future. But that's what I have this week. I'm Jason Armstrong. I'm done here.